You want me looking at you or the camera or mix?
Whatever.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so start, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit what you do.
Sure. My name's Todd Harris. I'm one of the co-founders and chief operating officers at Hi-Rez Studios, and these days we are working on the game SMITE, which is a 3D action MOBA.
Okay. Big genre. Tell us what's different about your game and compared to everything else.
Yeah, there's a lot of MOBAs already, and more announced here at Gamescom. Seems like almost every day. But SMITE is a bit different in a few ways. The number one way SMITE is different is the camera angle. So we take the camera that's usually over the top of the map and put it right behind the player. So it's a third-person game. Number two, the controls. Because of that camera, you directly control your character with WASD, and most of your shots are aimed skill shots. So in SMITE, probably 90% of your shots have to be aimed, where in most MOBAs, it's kind of the reverse. It's more unusual to have an aimed skill shot. We're also different because in SMITE there are multiple maps and modes. In most of the other MOBAs, there's one primary map, sometimes only one map, and the other one is very secondary. But in SMITE, we have the most popular mode, which is Conquest. It's a traditional 3-lane map with jungle. But even though that's most popular, it's played less than 50% of the time, because we also have Arena mode, which is very popular. It's a little more of a deathmatch. We have Siege, which is 4 versus 4. It's objective based. We have Joust map. We have Assault, which is our version of all random, all mid. So there's a number of game modes. So those are just a few of the ways SMITE's different.
As far as complexity and kind of getting into the game, do you kind of see it more on the casual end? Is it more the hardcore? Where do you guys fit in?
We really see both. I mean, if I had to position the game, I would say it's more accessible than the other MOBAs because mainly of the other game modes. So most people, if it's their first MOBA and they're coming from a shooter or an MMORPG, they will start with the arena mode, and that's very comfortable and it compares to other MMO PvP arena combat. You just learn your character, you learn how your skills are complementary with your team. You don't have to worry about lanes or really a complicated meta or jungling or any of that. So that makes it pretty accessible. The other thing that we do is we put in an auto item system, so you don't have to worry about item builds at all for your first few plays if you don't want to, and then you just turn it off when you're ready. So for a lot of people, it is their first MOBA, but we also believe that it's highly competitive because of the individual operations that are necessary, basically shooter skills or action game skills combined with teamwork and strategy. So at the very high level, you see some amazing plays and juking and amazing shots combined with the teamwork. So that also makes it pretty competitive.
So teamwork, competitive play, what a lovely segue into esports.
Sure.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Esports has been important since the beginning of SMITE. We had a really long beta process, and we started running esports tournaments, both an EU online tournament and NA online tournament years ago. So while we were tweaking the balance, we were getting all that feedback from competitive players and really seeding the competitive scene. And so when we launched the game this past March, we had a $200,000 launch event with teams competing from Europe and from North America. And just 3 weeks ago here in Cologne, we had another ESL hosted LAN for EU players, and we had one in Atlanta just last week, both with $50,000 prize pool. So the phase that we're in right now with SMITE is pretty cool for esports. We're starting in basically this month, the SMITE Pro League, which will be the first time we've had a regular league for SMITE. It's always been one-off tournaments. So with the Pro League, we'll have 6 professional teams competing against each other in Europe, 6 in North America. We actually have a Challenger Cup that allows new teams to come in and through regulation, maybe work their way in there. We'll have the regional championship in November, again here in Cologne and Atlanta. And then the big event is January in Atlanta, Georgia. We will bring together 2 NA teams, 2 EU teams, 2 teams from China for the first time, and 2 teams from Latin America, one from Brazil and one from Spanish-speaking Latin America that will qualify. So all those 8 teams will meet in Atlanta. Already has a prize that we've contributed of $600,000, and we'll be doing things with the community, basically in-game purchases. We love that model, and hopefully that will let us raise the prize pool to somewhere around the $1 million. That would be a awesome highlight. But already we think it's going to be a great event, especially given how young SMITE really is as far as years out there.
So you say it's going to be a great event. What makes an esport event a great event, in your opinion, apart from the massive pool of money?
Yeah, I think it is a lot more than the money. I mean, the money has definitely gotten large enough to grab headlines, and that's good for esports, but it is more than the money. I mean, you want certainly good competition, and we've been fortunate with SMITE to have brand names that people know, but also a lot of upsets. In fact, in both the EU tournament and the NA tournament, the strongest teams that actually had the organizations behind them, TSM, Cloud9, in Europe, Dignitas, the main cognitive team, those were upset by relatively new young teams. So that made an awesome event, honestly. So I think good teams, good competition, of course, high production value, so it's really just hype and enjoyable, especially if you're there, because you get the whole light show and event of it, but then also online, enough production and commentary and analysis so that viewers, even if they're relatively new to the game, can hopefully enjoy it. So those are the things our team's working hard on, trying to make sure we nail in January.
So obviously it's very community driven, that's what kind of makes or breaks the event, and you're saying that from the kind of pre-release online tournaments you had, it was mostly Europe and North America.
Yes.
So how are you finding the Asian markets taking to it? Because obviously esports is huge over there. So.
Yeah. So as you say, SMITE's mainly been in North America and Europe up until now, and so the Asian market we're super excited about. We believe they're going to love SMITE. We're starting with China, and right now it's only in beta. So those players are taking to it really well. The teams are having the ability to keep playing throughout beta, but it is less time, so they'll definitely be at a disadvantage. Maybe we'll get to win one this time around before they get more playtime in, because in terms of number of players and number of teams and amount of time, it's going to be much less. It's going to be a few months of more like open beta play, and maybe like 6 months or so for the really hardcore players. So they'll definitely be coming in with less experience, but we still think it's going to be great competition. Kind of similarly for Latin America. Again, we are just in closed beta with new servers down there through a publishing partner, and so there'll be a little less time, but again, a lot of excitement.
So obviously, I think maybe most MOBAs, but you get a lot of games, as soon as they kind of start making the game, they've all got esports in mind, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we're going to be really big with esports, and you can say it, but it doesn't necessarily happen. What do you think makes or breaks whether your game is going to be good for esports?
Yeah, I think it is very hard. It's hard to certainly predict what game is going to be successful anyway, and then what's going to be a successful esport is equally or more difficult. So I think there's no guarantee. Some of the aspects that I think help are one is actually just the team size, which is something that people don't really think about, but MOBAs are really the esports that have the largest team size at 5, and of course it goes down to 1 in something like StarCraft. And when you're holding an event, there's actually just a lot of logistics involved in getting the players where they need to be, particularly if the team is new and they're fairly young and not experienced with even traveling out of the country and going to a LAN. So a lot of logistics that companies may not even think about if they try to have a game with too large of team size. Makes it difficult to have an esport, at least one that's played on LAN every once in a while. So that's one of the more unusual ones. Of course, the game needs to be balanced, or it's not going to be adopted at all. And then the other important feature is the game feature support for esports, which includes things like a delayed demo to prevent cheating and sniping, a good spectator mode so that it's just as enjoyable to watch versus play, sometimes more enjoyable, and not all games fit into that category, certainly. So
you think the kind of the F2P model kind of benefits esports more than a paid game?
I definitely think the free-to-play model benefits esports. I think it benefits online games. I mean, SMITE is our 3rd game. They've all been free-to-play because they've all had an online multiplayer component, and free to play as long as it's done right, and from an esports standpoint, that means not pay to win, because that will not make an esport either. But if it's balanced and it's free just allows the most people to experience the game, and that is good for any multiplayer game because it makes for better matchmaking, because with a bigger population, the system has an easier time putting players together of equal skill. And then from a accessibility spectator standpoint, more people are familiar with the game, and if you're familiar with the game, you can appreciate the high-level play of the pros. If you're not as familiar, it's a little harder to appreciate that. So you want as broad of a player base playing as you can, at least right now in esports.
So as far as the big event in Atlanta, so what can you tell us kind of like about the venue, how many people it holds, when tickets and stuff are going on sale?
Yeah, so the big event, SMITE World Championship, SWC, is in January the 9th through the 11th. It'll be in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a convenient place to get to, actually, because we have the world's busiest airport. So that's one of the reasons, plus it's our hometown, but it lets us bring players there relatively easily. It's going to be in a venue that's called the Cobb Energy Center. It's a beautiful venue. The primary stage will hold around 3,000 seats. We expect it to sell out. There's also a secondary stage that'll be a few hundred, as we do in the format. We'll have games played on both over a 3-day period. And we haven't announced details on tickets, but I would expect that in the next month, details on tickets and also hotels and other logistics will be available on our website, smitegame.com.
So, okay, kind of covered SMITE. As I mentioned, we're at Gamescom, lots of MOBAs coming out. What do you think of what you're seeing? How do you see it as competition? And, you know, how do you think you're going to kind of stand out in the future?
Yeah, so at Gamescom and leading up to Gamescom, a lot of MOBAs announced or just being shown. I do think it's kind of where MMOs were a few years ago, where there's obviously some that are very successful as far as player numbers, as far as the business, and so there's a lot of money kind of being thrown at the genre. So I think, like MMOs, you know, there's room for a few at the top, and then maybe a few that are more niche, and then a lot that will not succeed, and that's just the way that the games industry works. So I think that we're kind of reaching a saturation point with the 2D MOBA. People will have to innovate either in camera angle and mechanics, the way we have in SMITE, or just with other game mechanics if they decide to stick with 2D MOBA, because I mean, realistically, with Riot, with Valve, and now with Blizzard all doing offerings, those are some exceptional developers that are coming into the space. So I think anyone considering a MOBA needs to really think about how they're different. It can't be just a skinned version, a new art on top of the existing gameplay, because players are already invested in those games. So, but I'm still, even though I think there'll be many tries that don't make it, I'm still optimistic that the MOBA genre in general is growing and getting innovation over time. So there'll be a lot of copycats and Me Too's, but over time, I do think the category will continue to grow in the way that when people see another FPS, they don't just say, oh, it's another FPS. If it's innovative enough, then there's room for it, and I think that MOBA is growing, you know, has already grown bigger than FPS, honestly, and I think there's room for more innovation.
Yeah, I think you, as far as SMITE goes, because the third person camera angle, you've obviously managed to step away from that, oh, it's a LOL clone, oh, it's a Dota clone. You've been able to kind of safely keep away from that. But like you said, I presume there's potentially going to be more SMITE clones. Yep. Do you think that will make you guys step to the side and reassess your own game? Like, okay, now we need to make it even more unique, or are you kind of comfortable that we don't need to change what we've got, everybody else can change what they've got? Right.
I think that, as you say, SMITE, its camera angle and its gameplay make it in a little different category than the two leading MOBAs, and I think we're comfortable with that place. We're not planning to make any radical changes, even if they're new 3D or third-person MOBAs that come into the space. We're fortunate to have an early mover advantage of being first into that space. If other games come into the space, it just helps establish, again, a whole genre or subgenre around the 3D MOBA or the action MOBA. And again, if we're the leader in that space, that's great. I mean, we've kind of established that not only can you do it with 3D, can you directly control your character, but these other features like the multiple maps and modes, which is more like a shooter than the 2D MOBA. So I would probably expect other MOBAs to try that same sort of thing. The other thing that we've announced here at Gamescom is SMITE for the Xbox One, which is another way that we can kind of continue to expose more people to the game and also from a business standpoint solidify our lead, solidify the SMITE brand, because it's playable on more platforms, and particularly on Xbox One I anticipate we'll have a lot of players that have never played a MOBA, never had interest in a MOBA. It might be players of Call of Duty or shooter action games that the action appeals to them, and then they're gradually exposed to the itemization and the teamwork and the variety of characters, and they decide they like it. And then, so.
Is it obviously cross-platform? Is it all on the same server? Everybody's connected to the same game, or is it?
No, it's not. The community was pretty vocal when we announced it. They were super excited, but the general community opinion was they wanted separate queuing and separate servers, and that really was our intent from the beginning. Is that they would be for a number of reasons. Certainly, I think SMITE will operate very well with a controller. Some PC players do it today, but it is a mixed community and players may have different feelings about that. And then also just the certification requirements associated with console are different from PC. So we are going to work hard to make sure the games have parity in general from a content perspective, but there'll almost certainly be a little bit of a delay when something new comes to the PC before it goes through the certification path and then gets deployed to Xbox One.
So obviously Call of Duty is massive on Xbox, so I think that will help the transition for a third-person MOBA. How do you think the free-to-play console will...
I think players are going to love it, honestly. I think realistically Microsoft is embracing the model, but it is very different from the retail model, and so we are going to need to work with Microsoft on some technical things and also some policy things to try to make it as frictionless as we can for the player. So that will be more of the challenge, and I think we're both up for that challenge. But from a player standpoint, I'm pretty optimistic that players will love to try something for free, and that if they like the game, they'll support it with their time and/or money. So,
do you foresee going over to PS4?
All I can say is at this point, it is a timed Xbox One exclusive. So.
That'll do, that's fine. So we'll watch this space perhaps, or don't, or whatever.
Exactly.
So anything else you want to tell us about the game?
Let's see. I think you covered it all.
That's good, I've done my job then, so I'm happy with that. Well, if that's it, then thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for answering the questions.
Cool.
And hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of whatever you've got left of Gamescom.
Will do. Thanks.
Thank you very much.